3 weeks earlier, Jim Carrey stood beneath the lights of a prestigious stage in Paris and delivered an entire acceptance speech in flawless French. Instead of celebrating the achievement, the internet exploded with a far stranger story. People insisted the man on that stage wasn't really Jim Carrey at all. They zoomed in on screenshots, compared old photos to new ones, studied his eyes, his cheekbones, even the way his forehead moved, convincing themselves he had somehow been replaced. By the time he appeared on The View that morning, those bizarre rumors had already spread everywhere, and Joy Behar made it clear she intended to drag every one of them back into the spotlight. She wanted answers about whether the man sitting across from her was really Jim. She wanted to know what had happened to his face. She seemed determined to uncover whatever secret she believed was hiding behind his appearance. But what she completely underestimated was that Jim Carrey had spent an entire lifetime understanding how people think, how they judge, and how they project their own assumptions onto others. What followed wasn't just a response. It became a lesson in what happens when curiosity quietly crosses the line into cruelty. Before we get into it, subscribe and leave a comment below, because you're about to witness the unforgettable moment Jim Carrey reminded everyone why his brilliance has always gone far beyond comedy. The atmosphere inside The View was electric as he walked onto the set. Now 64 years old, he carried himself with the relaxed confidence of someone who no longer felt the need to prove anything to anyone. His shoulder-length jet-black hair framed a face that looked noticeably smoother than many fans remembered, yet his unmistakable eyes still sparkled with the playful energy that had captivated audiences for decades. His smile was genuine as he greeted the hosts, although those paying close attention could sense a quiet caution beneath his warmth, a subtle difference from the wildly expressive performer the world had known in his younger years. Whoopi Goldberg welcomed him with a heartfelt embrace like an old friend returning home, while Sarah Haynes could barely hide her excitement. The audience rose to its feet, applauding for nearly a full minute, a powerful reminder of how much people had missed seeing him. Even Joy Behar joined the applause, but there was something different about her expression. Her smile looked carefully measured, while her eyes seemed less interested in welcoming Jim and far more focused on examining every detail of his face. "Jim Carrey, welcome back to The View," Whoopi said as the applause finally settled. "It's been far too long." Jim smiled. "Thanks, Whoopi. It's nice to be back among the living. Although apparently some people still aren't convinced I'm actually alive." The audience burst into laughter as he playfully acknowledged the bizarre clone conspiracy that had taken over social media. Everyone laughed, everyone except Joy, whose expression barely changed. She wasn't interested in the joke. She was waiting for the conversation she had planned all along. Sarah quickly steered things toward a more uplifting topic. "Let's talk about the César Award. Delivering your entire speech in French must have taken incredible preparation." Jim's face immediately softened. 8 months, he replied. "I worked with Gregory Collier from the César Academy on every word and every pronunciation, because I wanted to show genuine respect for the moment." He paused before sharing something deeply personal. "My great-great-great-great-grandfather was born in Saint-Malo, France, about 300 years ago. He eventually moved to Canada, and generations later my father was born in Ontario. Standing on that stage speaking French felt like completing a journey my family started centuries ago." Whoopi smiled warmly. "That's beautiful. And your family was there with you?" Jim nodded. "My daughter Jane, my grandson Jackson, and Min. The people who mean everything to me. It was one of the greatest nights I've ever experienced." But just as the conversation settled into that heartfelt moment, Joy interrupted, and the mood in the studio shifted almost instantly. "Speaking of that night," she said, "let's address the elephant in the room." She looked directly at him. "You looked different. Social media was full of people claiming it wasn't even you, that maybe you sent a body double or even a clone. Some believe you've been completely replaced, Even celebrities like Megan Fox and Katy Perry were talking about it. Her words landed heavily across the studio. The other hosts exchanged uneasy glances, sensing exactly where this was heading. Yet Jim didn't flinch. His expression stayed calm, almost amused. "Yes," he answered. Megan Fox joked that she couldn't take another surprise and wanted to know if it was really me. Katy Perry posted a bullseye emoji. A drag artist named Alexis Stone even shared photos wearing a prosthetic mask that supposedly proved she had impersonated me. Somehow all of that became a bigger story than the honor I had actually received. He paused, allowing the absurdity to settle over the room. "I've seen all the theories. They're certainly imaginative." Then his tone became noticeably more direct. "But let me ask you something, Joy. Do you honestly believe I've been replaced by a clone? Or are you simply keeping the controversy alive because it makes better television?" For the first time, Joy looked caught off guard. "I'm asking the questions viewers are asking," she replied. Jim calmly leaned forward. "Are they really? Or are you giving conspiracy theories a much bigger stage because outrage gets attention?" Joy's smile faded. "I'm simply pointing out that your appearance has changed dramatically." Jim shrugged with a faint grin. "People age, Joy. That's kind of how life works. Unless you're Paul Rudd, apparently. I'm 64 years old. I've spent years away from the spotlight. Did people honestly expect me to look exactly the way I did in The Mask? That movie came out 3 decades ago." But Joy wasn't finished. "It's more than aging, though, isn't it?" she asked, leaning closer. "Plastic surgeons have analyzed your photos. They've mentioned brow lifts, blepharoplasty, Botox, fillers. One estimate even claimed the work could cost around $60,000. Care to respond?" The room fell completely silent. Jim waited a moment before speaking. And when he finally did, every word carried unusual weight. "You want me to respond to strangers making medical conclusions from photographs viewed on their laptops? Doctors who've never met me, never examined me, confidently diagnosing procedures through a screen?" Joy answered quickly. "They're respected experts." Jim nodded slightly. "Experts at speculation. And you're very good at turning speculation into entertainment." Then he looked directly at her. "Tell me something, Joy. When was the last time your appearance was dissected on national television? When was the last time complete strangers debated whether your face was real? Or whether you were even you?" For just a moment, her confidence cracked. "This isn't about me," she replied. Jim didn't raise his voice. "Isn't it? Because from where I'm sitting, it sounds like a 64-year-old man who stepped away from fame, spent years painting, sculpting, and trying to find some peace has returned only to be put on trial for looking different. Now I'm expected to explain every wrinkle that's gone, every feature that's changed, every assumption people have made about my face." He slowly shook his head. "I'm not going to do that. My face belongs to me. Whatever choices I make, or don't make, about my appearance are between me, my reflection, and the people I decide to share them with. It's not material for television. It's not evidence for internet detectives. It's my life." Joy quickly tried to regain control of the conversation. "But when you're a public figure," she said, "don't you give up your right to privacy?" And this is where the conversation took a turn no one in that studio was prepared for. "The problem with that way of thinking," Jim said calmly, "is that we've heard it before. People once used that exact excuse to justify tearing apart every corner of a celebrity's private life. And eventually, most of us agreed that crossing those boundaries wasn't acceptable. The studio had fallen into complete silence. Every person in the audience seemed locked onto his next word. Then his voice grew more serious. "Let me tell you what that clone story really meant to me." He paused for a moment before continuing. "My daughter was sitting in that audience in Paris. My grandson, the little boy I love more than anything, was watching me receive the greatest honor of my career. And Min, The woman I finally felt comfortable introducing to the world after keeping that part of my life private, was standing beside me holding my hand. His tone became quieter, but somehow even more powerful. That was one of the happiest moments I've ever lived. Yet instead of celebrating it, people online decided it never happened. They convinced themselves I wasn't even there. They ignored 8 months of preparation, ignored my family sitting just a few feet away, ignored Michel Gondry embracing me backstage after the ceremony, and somehow transformed a real memory into a ridiculous conspiracy. Then he looked directly at Joy. Do you have any idea what that feels like? To watch one of the most meaningful moments of your life get reduced to internet entertainment? To see strangers studying your grandson's face, trying to decide whether he looked convincing enough standing beside the man they insisted wasn't his real grandfather. For the first time, Joy visibly lost her confidence. I'm not supporting those conspiracy theories, she replied. Jim didn't hesitate. No. You're giving them legitimacy. The moment you bring them onto a national television show, as if they deserve serious discussion, you breathe new life into them. There's a huge difference between asking difficult questions and giving nonsense a bigger audience. And for the last 10 minutes, you've been standing on the wrong side of that line. Sensing the tension, Sarah Haynes gently stepped in. Jim, we're honestly so happy you're here, and everything you shared about your family was incredibly moving. Jim offered her a grateful smile. Thank you, Sarah. And believe it or not, I'm not angry. He paused before adding, I'm exhausted. Exhausted by a culture that treats famous people like exhibits under glass instead of human beings. Exhausted by an industry that rewards cruelty more than compassion, and exhausted by conversations where people who know better still choose controversy, because it generates more attention. He turned back toward Joy, his voice softening. You know what's truly disappointing? You could have asked about the speech itself. You could have asked what it meant to reconnect with my family's roots in France after 3 centuries. You could have asked about my father, Percy Joseph Carey, the funniest man I've ever known, the man I honored in front of the entire French film community. You could have asked about the paintings and sculptures I've poured my heart into, work that has brought me a kind of peace no movie ever could. You could have asked what it feels like to find love again after unimaginable loss, or what it's been like watching my daughter become a mother and discovering the joy of being a grandfather. You could have asked what happens when someone steps away from fame long enough to remember they're still a real person underneath all the characters they've played. He spread his hands slightly. Instead, you asked whether I'm a clone. You wanted me to defend my face. You took one of the most important experiences of my life and turned it into another conspiracy headline. That's not journalism, Joy. It's not even good television. It's just sad. That single word seemed to echo through the studio. Joy's face reddened as she struggled to regain control. I think you're being overly sensitive, she replied, though even she didn't sound convinced. Jim smiled, letting out the unmistakable laugh audiences had known for decades. A laugh that could shift from playful to heartbreaking in an instant. Overly sensitive, he repeated. So that's what we call it now? If someone doesn't enjoy having their appearance dissected on television, they're sensitive? I've been called crazy. I've been called difficult. I've been called washed up, but being labeled overly sensitive because I don't want to justify my face. That's definitely a new one. He settled comfortably into his chair, completely at ease. Here's something life has taught me after 64 years. The people who accuse everyone else of being too sensitive are often the first to become uncomfortable when someone pushes back, and the people who hide behind the phrase, "I'm just asking questions," usually don't want to accept responsibility for the consequences those questions create. Joy quickly answered, "I'm not hurting anyone. I'm doing my job." Jim's expression never changed. Your job is supposed to inform people and entertain them. What you've been doing for the last 15 minutes isn't accomplishing either. It's harassment dressed up as curiosity. It's cruelty pretending to be journalism. Suddenly Joy stood, her chair scraping loudly across the studio floor. I don't have to sit here and listen to this, she snapped. Jim remained perfectly calm. No, you don't. But you were the one who chose to make this conversation about clone theories and cosmetic surgery instead of having a genuine discussion. That was your decision. Now you're upset because I refused to play the role you expected. Joy glanced around the studio, searching for support. Her co-hosts remained silent. The audience watched without saying a word. Every camera continued recording as the moment slipped further out of her control. This interview is over, she announced while unclipping her microphone. Jim answered quietly, almost sympathetically. Of course it is. Isn't that how these stories usually end? The moment someone refuses to be intimidated, suddenly they're painted as the problem. Suddenly the person asking the questions becomes the victim. He slowly shook his head. I've spent my entire career playing characters. Heroes, villains, fools, philosophers, you name it. But the character you're playing right now, the person who can criticize everyone else but can't handle being challenged, that's never a role with a happy ending. I've seen enough stories to know exactly how that one finishes. Joy turned and walked off the set, the sharp sound of her heels echoing across the silent studio. Jim simply watched her leave with a calm expression, almost as though he were observing a fascinating lesson in human behavior. After several long seconds, Whoopi finally broke the silence. Well, that certainly happened. Jim turned toward her with a gentle smile. I'm sorry things went this way, Whoopi. I honestly came here hoping we'd talk about art, family, and some wonderful memories. But I'm done apologizing for standing up for myself. For too many years, I let people say whatever they wanted because I thought staying quiet was easier. I'm not doing that anymore. Sarah nodded, visibly emotional. For what it's worth, your César speech was beautiful. When you spoke about your father teaching you love, generosity, and laughter, I cried. Jim smiled warmly. He really was the funniest man I've ever known. Everything good people see in me started with him. The comedy, the desire to make people smile, the belief that laughter can be an act of hope in a world that constantly tries to take joy away from us. That all came from my father. He paused before looking directly into the camera. People often ask why I walked away from acting, why I retired, came back for Sonic, and then stepped away again. The truth is, I got tired of being Jim Carrey, the celebrity, the brand, the non-stop performance that everyone expected 24 hours a day. His voice became softer than ever. I needed to remember who I was before any of that existed. The kid from Newmarket, Ontario, making ridiculous faces just to make his sick mother laugh. The teenager who left school so he could help support his family when life became unbelievably difficult. The young stand-up comic who failed so badly during his early performances that he almost gave up completely. Then he smiled, not the exaggerated grin audiences knew from the movies, but the quiet, genuine smile of someone who had finally found peace with himself. That was the person I rediscovered when I picked up a paintbrush, when I started sculpting, when I stepped away from movie sets and simply allowed myself to exist, Jim said quietly. For the first time in years, I met the man hiding beneath all the characters I'd spent a lifetime playing. And the surprising part is, I actually like him. He's much quieter than the version the world knows. Some days he's sad. Some days he's reflective. But he's real. And that authenticity means more to me than any award, blockbuster, or standing ovation ever could. He leaned forward, his eyes filled with unmistakable conviction. Do you know what it's like to spend 4 decades being treated like a product? To realize your face is considered an asset worth millions? To know that every smile, every wrinkle, every expression is examined as if it belongs to the public instead of you? I spent so many years becoming the brand called Jim Carrey that I nearly forgot there was still a human being underneath it all. He paused before smiling softly. Painting gave that person back to me. When I put a brush on a canvas, nobody cares whether the artist is Jim Carrey. They don't care about movie posters or magazine covers. They only care if the work is honest, if it's good. That's freedom, and once I found that freedom, I realized it was what I'd been searching for all along. Then he looked directly into the camera, and suddenly it felt as though he was speaking to millions of people personally. If you're watching this and you've ever been attacked online, if strangers have called you fake, judged your appearance, questioned your choices, or made you feel like you had to defend who you are, remember this. You don't owe anyone an explanation. Not for your face. Not for your body. Not for your life. Not for simply existing. The people who constantly demand those explanations are often struggling to face their own reflection. The audience exploded into applause. It wasn't the routine applause expected from a television audience. It was louder, longer, and deeply emotional. The kind of reaction that happens when people recognize a truth they've been carrying themselves. And what happened after that would take the conversation far beyond the walls of the studio. Within hours, clips from the interview spread across every major platform. Headlines praised Jim's calm, thoughtful response to the bizarre clone conspiracy, while his words about discovering the person beneath the masks resonated with actors, artists, and ordinary people alike. One particular line echoed everywhere. "My face is my business." It quickly became more than a quote. It became a statement embraced by countless people who had ever been judged, criticized, or picked apart by the internet. Meanwhile, Joy Behar returned to The View the following day without directly mentioning the confrontation. When critics questioned her approach, she defended the interview by insisting she had simply been practicing legitimate journalism and addressing issues of public interest. But those explanations did little to slow the backlash. Every time another clip of Jim's composed, carefully measured responses resurfaced online, public opinion seemed to shift even further in his favor. The conversation only grew larger when Gregory Collier from the César Academy released another statement, this time with unmistakable disappointment. He reminded everyone that Jim Carrey had devoted 8 months to preparing a speech that honored their ceremony and their language, only to find himself returning home to conspiracy theories and ridicule instead of celebration. His conclusion struck a nerve. That reaction revealed far more about modern culture than it ever did about Jim himself. Soon afterward, Michel Gondry, Jim's longtime friend and collaborator from Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, shared a brief but heartfelt message of his own. He wrote that he had hugged Jim backstage in Paris, that it had always been the real Jim, and that people should stop searching for imaginary imposters and start appreciating the people they still have while they're here. As the media storm gradually faded, Jim quietly returned to Hawaii, back to his paintings, his sculptures, the people he loved, and a life deliberately kept far away from constant cameras and endless headlines. He had said everything he needed to say. He had defended himself without losing his composure, his dignity, or his kindness. More importantly, he reminded millions that behind the famous face, the unforgettable characters, and decades of Hollywood success was simply a human being asking for the same respect everyone else hopes to receive. In the end, that was the real Jim Carrey. Not a clone, not an internet conspiracy, not a celebrity desperately chasing relevance, but a man from Canada who spent 40 years making the world laugh before finally discovering that the opinion which mattered most was his own. And in front of millions of viewers, he proved that wisdom delivered with compassion can leave a far deeper impact than anger ever could. Now it's your turn to weigh in. Do you think Joy Behar crossed the line, or was she simply doing her job as a television host? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for more unforgettable stories that challenge expectations and leave audiences talking long after the cameras stop rolling.